Kia ora. Thank you so much. And I start with this image because it greeted me upon my arrival. And I have to really give it a shout out to the New Zealand Institute of Architects. It's, first of all, an incredible, humbling experience to come here and to spend the week with a great group of speakers and participants. We've been so wonderfully, generously welcomed by local architects and lovers of design. And one of the things that happened to me by chance is that this I saw on the first day of my arrival at the Unity bookstore, which is a great bookstore just around the corner. And then I actually got to go to Rotorua with Jeremy Smith, and we actually went into the baths and experienced them. I think this is only about 7 or 8 months old. RCG Architects, I believe, are the creators, and it's an incredibly fabulous place if you are ever in the neighborhood. Well, Jeremy was actually, we went there to actually see the Scion Science Park. And I also have to say, this is a pretty impressive building at a much humbler scale. But I do want to state that Irving Smith Architects and the Scion project just beat the pants off of the Google headquarters at an international award. And it was looking at the most innovative architecture on the planet. And I have to hand it to you, to Jeremy, and to New Zealand for really, I think, daring and caring, and in this respect also creating some very, very unique wooden architecture from an engineering standpoint. So you have that added seismic sort of activity. And so when you look at the trusses here, you can see how they're not necessarily kissing each other. So there's little metal brackets that can sort of take the undulation and the movement both side to side and up and down. And these are the very things that we need to somehow communicate to each other around the globe. So just hats off to the work and having clients like that. We were then also given yesterday a chance to actually interact with students. So 50 students came and we did a little workshop called Biggie Smalls. Jeremy and I were leading it. And it was a few hours. There are probably many of the students here in the audience. But it really gave each of us a chance to look at and begin to understand the city of Auckland. And we were asking them to think big. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have here in the city, and how to maybe come up with some ideas. So one group drew this little fairy map of how one could perhaps take advantage of this coastline that you have. And I challenged them. I said, how much coastline is there in Auckland? And no one in the room knew exactly. And I find that is actually, the first thing that you have to do in order to start a design concept is to know your site or to know what it's about. So I challenged them to go out and find out how much coastline there actually is. Well, I did. I did this, and there are 1,200 kilometers of coastline within the Auckland city region. And that is enormous. That's incredible. So it's actually twice as large as the New York City region, where we do a lot of resiliency work. So the chance to interact with the students yesterday, to then also many asked, how did you actually become an architect? And so I wanted to start today by just sort of going back. And this is myself in California at UCLA in one of my presentations, going through a presentation, very, very Photoshoppy at that time. I did 6 years of studies. I felt that I had learned everything about cardboard and balsa wood, but very little about building. So I set off for 5 years, 2 of which were on the road and 3 in Seattle, where I apprenticed in different materials. In German, this is called Auf der Walz. So I went to Germany, to all of these countries, and within each, I decided to look at one material and to sort of study it and to learn from folks who were building and using it. So in Mali, it was the Adobe block. In Italy, I happened to work for a while surveying Hadrian's Villa with Robert Mangurian and Marianne Ray. In Lithuania, there was a stonemason who allowed me to just do some work on both granite and marble blocks. Little tours to go see really highlights of some wonderful architecture in Kiji. It's an area with a lot of wooden churches and stave churches. Some work with masonry. And then my last one was actually glassblowing in the forests of Sweden. That led me actually to come back to Seattle, which is a kind of an area within the US where there's a lot of glassblowing. And I went to Pilchuck Glass School, which is founded by Dale Chihuly. There I learned how to cast, and also blow. Then I actually got my first job kind of as an architect, working on Dale's installation team. And we literally started taking the glass out of the buildings or galleries and into exterior environments, and the pieces got larger and larger and incorporated steel, armatures, and so forth. So I was responsible at that time to kind of design and build a lot of these pieces as they were getting larger. So in addition to that idea of learning materials and materiality, I also traveled. And Jeremy and I were talking a lot about our backpacking days. I think when you're from New Zealand, you probably want to get off the islands and head into the world. So I met a lot of Kiwis on my trips. And we traveled in different parts of the world. And all of those impressions also are what fed my own interest in architecture. And then when I did have the opportunity to kind of bring all of those interests of building and materiality and sort of traveling together, I got my first job in Seattle working on a Jewish temple. This is a Reform Jewish temple, and worked there for 3 years to actually build it and be on the site and help with the construction. And that's where I could actually bring my interests of metal, blacksmithing, carpentry, wood, and glass together into the sort of ark where the Torahs are kept, and did the design for this sort of centerpiece within the temple. I had a German passport, so I was able to also work in Europe, and I just decided one day to set off to Europe. And that's also where then I met Bjarke and Julien at the Venice Architecture Biennale in 2004, which is the adventure that I'm still on. Bjarke and Julien had worked together for about 5 years. They split up to create 2 amazing offices, JDS and BIG. So Bjarke, and the way that I've structured the talk about the work is what we call formgivning. That's a Danish word. It means giving form. And it means specifically giving form to that which is not yet there, giving form to the future. And that is at sort of the essence of our ideas or conceptualizing of the work, is that we are looking for ways to take in the patterns of life, the data that one is now receiving from so many different sources, and finding a way that, for this planet that we are on, what is the future of this planet? How do we want to live and work and play? So I'm going to show from a range of projects, and I'm going to go from the smallest to the largest to show how we go about sort of reaching this aim of thinking about the future. So we're going to start at 34 square meters in the forests of Sweden. This is a a project that we call Biosphere, and it was made for this wonderful couple, very Swedish, in outside of Luleå, which is in the Arctic North. They have been asking architects to come up and build sort of individual little sleeping huts in the trees. And over the course of a decade, they now have assembled 9 of these. And you can go in through the forest and adventure. And this is very close to the Ice Hotel. So this was a great idea of theirs, which was the Ice Hotel draws people to come to the Arctic North in the winter, but then there wasn't really a lot of tourism in the summer. So they were trying to figure out how could we interest or bring people back to make it a year-round destination. When they asked us to go up there and to actually see the site, they made a big effort in explaining to us all of the species that were living in the forest. So, you have the sort of bobcats and the, birds, the moose, the wolves, and they wanted us to be respectful to this other species. So we got very interested in the many different birds that were living in the forest, and we decided if we're going to be asked to build a tree house with a bed and a place for a couple or a family to stay, why don't we actually surround it with 350 birdhouses? So you're never going to be alone while you're there. So lo and behold, this is just the kind of idea or concept that they loved. And over a summer, the building season, we managed to go up there and provide working drawings and get this built. And when you come into it, you can actually go down to a point where even the lighting that's hanging above you is also a birdhouse made of lights. And so you're sleeping surrounded by birds. You're waking up in your morning coffee and you're looking out and being greeted by everyone. So it's really a great opportunity to just experience this wonderful nature all around in all seasons. We're up to 700 square meters. This is a client of ours. We love these types of clients. He came in and he said, I have a son. He's 18 years old. The university just told me that they have no dormitory for him. Please get him out of my house. That was the brief. And so what had happened in Denmark is that for a number of years, the dorms are built by public agencies, and they had not kept up with the pace of the schools. So there was a dearth of places to stay. So a lot of sofa surfing was happening. So we basically came up with this idea. It's all about affordability. So we looked at how can we upscale the containers. And when you think of upscaling containers, you've seen these projects before, and of course there are a lot of great architects working with this as a building block. One thing that many of those projects miss, however, is the kind of social quality. And so we were as interested in the arrangement of those containers and the spaces that they would create, both interior and exterior. And we wanted to create a kind of social, active space for a young, sort of dynamic user group. And we also wanted it to be completely off-grid, so tied to renewable energy, using the water as a kind of heat sink, and also to create a vegetated roof and a social roof. So that's how this project came into being. It's 9 containers. They create 12 apartments. And you can see here we have that courtyard in the center. There's even a tree that's planted. And all of this is sitting on top of a pontoon. The pontoon is below the surface and is what keeps it from swaying too much in the waves. It's also where they have a kind of living room space and do their laundry and have the mechanical equipment. So, this is not very brain science. You just basically take existing containers. They're extremely cheap. You cut a few holes in them, you arrange them. In this case, we had that work done in Poland and then tugged it over to Copenhagen. And these folks are living in the best areas of Copenhagen's harbor. They socialize and are, with kids their own age. And then this is a bed that is now about a third of the cost of a typical traditional dormitory had it been built on land and with usual means. So take a joy here. Maybe turn up the music a little bit if you guys can. I want to go back and be a student again when I see this.
Share the same feelings, that boy, that girl. People, don't close your eyes.
So a pretty nice life. And we did this prototype actually on our own. So we paid for it with the client. He didn't have as deep pockets as he told us when we first started. And so it was something that we then actually became kind of a co-developer and owner of the IP. And the city thought it was such a great idea. The 12 units immediately rented out. And so the city ordered another 5. So there's like now 72 dorm apartments right there in the center of Copenhagen with an incredible lifestyle. And we're looking to take this idea on the road. So if there's areas here in the harbor, please let me know. Now, you all know happy clients is the biggest thing. So the son did move eventually out of the house, and he's very, very happy. 1,300 square meters. Noma is a restaurant. It is built with a Macedonian Danish chef who was very much about basically creating a whole kitchen and thinking of food that was very much tied to its when things are actually available. So there are 3 different types of menus at different types of year. And then there's a lot of foraging, there's a lot of collecting of roots, and Noma is really known throughout the world as a destination for this type of sort of culinary experience. And Renee has done a lot also in terms of thinking about the future of food and how to both grow it, and is thinking on a national level of, and what was important for him, so we helped him design the latest kind of edition of the restaurant. He wanted to go into an existing bunker. So this was an old bunker in the former military area of Copenhagen, and it was basically just left as a kind of a graffiti zone. But it's in a very, very beautiful area right adjacent to Christiania, which is also a really interesting part of sort of free society. We developed, or we brought back to life that armory battery building, and then we added 10 other structures. So it's like a village where each of the rooms is doing another part to the culinary kind of experience that you see in preparing the food and the different menus. So this is the entrance as you walk across the marsh. And what I love is that the entrance door is really just a oversized coat closet. So you add you place your coats there to the right of the image. And then he wanted you to feel at home, so it gets domesticated right away. Brings down to where you're walking past the hearth, you're walking into almost what looks like a living room. You're being seated and you're receiving sort of an aperitif. And then you are then escorted through the kitchen, which is open in the center of the different buildings, and into the main dining area. So this is then alive once everyone is seated. There's only one serving that is done in the day. And then they have other spaces that are for larger groups as well. And again, we did a lot of material research here. This is the barbecue where the meats are seasoned. We have a greenhouse for herbs that they have not picked or foraged in forests, and fermentation rooms and all of that. We're up to 2,500 square meters. This is the Danish Refugee Museum. So again, something that I think speaks to a history within Denmark, but at the same time is a very, is a subject matter that's very crucial to have today within Europe. And what this is a former army barracks that was converted into a refugee camp after World War II, was then converted into a hospital and served Western Denmark. And then we were asked to take a look at these two army barracks and to create this museum with a very limited budget. And so the move that we decided to make was just the loop that you see there, connecting the two buildings, of course, bringing the two buildings up to current standards. But we wanted to create kind of an entry space that could be multi-purpose. And so it's core 10 as the material with a wooden kind of lattice work that connects the two army barracks, and then a kind of casework that provides some separation of spaces from the entrance into that multi-purpose space. And then you can see how the historic building and the new building are completely separated, so that at any given time in the future, the older building has its integrity fully intact. And then there are a series of exhibitions, both of the historical refugees from the 1940s, as well as the current issue of refugees in Europe. So, I think a really nice scale. You can really do a lot. And then also this idea of course, keeping and retaining the history and revitalizing. 5,500 square meters. This is actually a project that just opened just a couple of months ago. And it's in the North Harbor of Copenhagen. It's our own office. So what you see there shiny on the right side of the image is the project. And much of the project is prescribed in the master plan. It needed to look industrial. It needed to have an open ground floor that was open to the public with a public function. It needed landscaping around it. It had this wonderful spit, or this dock that you can walk out to and see the project. We interpreted that kind of industrial look or feel into thinking about what the largest prefab concrete kind of panels are. And typically these are used in bridge building. And the idea was to consider using elements that could actually be stacked, and you would have the hull of the building kind of within a few weeks of construction. You can also see that the fire stair is external. That's the sort of triangular walkway as you walk down. And we wanted to also, very importantly for us, because now for the last, I would say 7 to 8 years, we have expanded from just doing architecture to also landscape architecture, product design, planning, and engineering. So we call this the Big Leap, and this project was really conceptualized as the first project that would be our own engineering, our own landscape, our own products. And you can see that in terms of the sort of axonometric as it sort of pulls apart what those pieces are. So we've only been in it for 3 months now, and it's an amazing place. People, of course, are saying, why on earth are you building in concrete? So we looked at wood in this setting, also with it's a salty kind of brackish water, and we felt that in terms of thinking about the longevity of the building, we wanted it to be something that could stand for a very long time. Concrete won out on those kind of issues, and then we were interested in also using it as an example or a research on how to bring the emissions of concrete down, because wood, of course, is an incredible material emission wise, but it's not. We're not producing enough wood, and we don't have enough manufacturing to actually do it all. So we should be as interested to bring the emissions down in existing materials like concrete, like steel, other composites, and that to us is we brought the carbon emissions of standard concrete down by about 30%. With this building and new mixtures that Aalborg Cement have now put onto the marketplace. So it's very cathedral-like. The space kind of spirals up every floor. There's 6 floors total. And then you can see the fire stair just outside the window with the person sitting out there. That then becomes this kind of terrace that we have on every floor. And you'll notice that as a kind of design signature in a lot of our projects. 7,000 square meters. Now we're in northern Norway. This is a furniture factory. So I love the idea that someone that wants to design a factory actually would come and hire an architect. It's not very often that you get that kind of a project. But he's a furniture manufacturer using wood. And he wanted to, first of all, create a BREEAM outstanding building that cut the fewest number of trees down on site, and that the forest was respected as giving life and sustenance to this 3-generation family. So here's the client, and coming to Big in our office, our old office. And here's a kind of array of furniture, and you can find these things all over the world. Even Times Square has Vestre furniture. And his idea was that most factories are dirty, they're sealed from the public, and they're dangerous. And he wanted to have something that was basically green, fully transparent and accessible to the public, and was a safe workplace. He was also very interested in the future growth or how the building would expand. And so we basically programmatically looked at all the processes of creating the furniture. We created the plus because then you can expand any of those 4 extend them into the forest as needed. And then, of course, in order for us to reach that BREEAM outstanding, we needed to actually think of the life cycle analysis. And we very quickly turned to wood as the primary building material. And that, of course, was great for them, too, because it then epitomizes how they think about design. They, of course, still need to administer and to have overview. So we created this courtyard in the center, which then has a 2nd floor. And from the 2nd floor, you can then look down and administer the entire process. And then as you can see on the floor, there's a kind of color coding, almost kind of Alice in Wonderland, Golden Brick Road, that takes you from one process to another. But again, the important thing here was that in the entire construction, we would cut the fewest number of trees. The trees that were cut would be used in the furniture making. And then he asked us to minimize any unhealthy kind of ingredients, and asked us to also look at how the building materials were being sourced, whether there was child labor or slave labor or forced labor in the process of the creation or making of the products. So a wonderful client that's asking us to really do a much deeper dive into the sourcing of materials. We discovered the Vikings have been doing this for ages, that when you burn wood, it's protecting from termites. And so the entire facade is of burnt wood, and a trick that you probably do here as well. And it's just it's a really great example of what a factory building could be. 7,000 square meters. This is in Paris. It's an existing bank building from the 1930s. It was actually the Bank of New York on the Champs-Élysées. And what's remarkable is that you think these kinds of buildings would last. But I remember coming to this building in the 1980s, and it was a Virgin megastore. So I bought albums on the Champs-Élysées out of this building. So I don't know how long it served as a bank, but very quickly it had been stripped of its materials. It was discarded and partitioned and had lost its soul until the Galeries Lafayette family, kind of the owners of Galeries Lafayette, asked us to bring it back to life. And so this is a department store, retail, and as you know, retail is undergoing kind of an existential crisis. How do we, get people to shop physically as opposed to just online? And so we wanted people to have experiences as they move in to the building. So you brought straight from the street into the center that was formerly the sort of main atrium space. From there, you can then move around. There are different orientation devices. There's also a lot of casework that offers you kind of new ways of testing out your new look. So from sunglasses to sneakers, and even what I love, this is my favorite one, a sushi kind of delivery band, so that when you see this, you can test out the different color handbag with the different color outfit, and you can figure out what combination you really, really like. So it's just a fun way of creating a kind of retail experience. We use every space imaginable, even under the stair became now a really trendy kind of cafe. 12,000 square meters. This was an idea that, oftentimes you fail in the efforts and things that you're trying to do. So this is one of those examples where we wanted to create a building system like the Domino House, but out of wood. And we worked with a Finnish furniture forest product maker to create what we called Pubo at the time. And for us, the important thing was everything that's prefab is often rectilinear, and therefore it's very standardized and things look extremely the same. We were looking at standardization, but with chamfers or with a different building block, so that you could actually build and become way more organic, and you could also work within the site, so the different contours and such. So something on the left is your typical standard prefab building, social housing, and on the right was an idea of actually using the same prefab modules, but then creating a certain porosity. Needless to say, we lost this competition in Finland, but we then used the thinking that we had built on that to actually build an affordable housing project in Copenhagen that you see here. And so there's the standard typical housing on the left, and then here's same budget, but housing on the right. And you can see how through these elements you're able to curve. You can blow out certain elements to allow for the movement of a pathway or connect a street. Underneath, you can you create spaces in between the modules. So you also we called it free space, but of course nothing is free. But by separating the modules, you then have basically the underside of the module above you, the top side of the module below you, and then each side is the other module. So you end up with this very generous space that is much taller, 3.5 meters than you would find typically. And these were then extremely sought after. The first project we used this system is 77 units. There were about 10,000 applications for those 77 units. You can see by the person standing there just how generous that midsection is. And then we've now implemented the same system in other parts of Denmark. So this is in Aarhus, and now it's in a spiral form. And then we also retain the water right there in the center. So this is evaporative. You take all of the rainwater from hard surfaces and you bring it into the center as a retention pond, and then it evaporates passively. And the funniest thing is that people tend to pay more looking at water than dirt. So as you think, this is still an affordable project, but it still raises the quality of the space that people are coming into. And then you can build with those blocks all the way down to any type of like street experience. So a couple more interior shots. 92, we're jumping up. So we're in Singapore. This is a little closer to you here. And we designed a skyline project called Capita Spring. It's with Capital Land. I'm sure they are known to you. And what's interesting about the project, and of course in Singapore over so many decades, is this incredible biophilic high-rise greenery kind of integration. So they challenged us to take the site and produce 140% landscape back in the project. So they were only obligated to produce 100% of the site in the building, but added the caveat that they wanted 40% more. So it's a mixed-use building. It has retail on the ground floor with some public uses. It has a hawker center, which is divine, with lots of affordable food, a 300-room hotel, a green oasis, which I'll get into, and the blue is different office spaces, and then a rooftop garden. And by this, it's a edible garden, so it's a performative garden. That gives you some plans. This is the rooftop. So from here, you can see all around. You can get the Singaporean kind of experience as you see the tankers coming in. And what's unique about what you're looking at is that everything you see there is edible. And so there's 4 restaurants in the building, and they actually clip and get their herbs and spices from that edible garden. And then that is then a unique way of creating a little bit of an urban farm, even if it's very small. But if all buildings were to think in this way, you could actually have a very nice addition to thinking about your cities. This is a work floor or an office floor. Every inch is really thought through and created to offer spaces for kind of co-working and meeting each other. And then in the middle, in order to get that 140%, we actually had to create 7 floors of greenery. And this is just a space that the workers and everybody can actually just come out in and explore. So here you can see within that 7 floors, this wonderful ramp takes you down, and then sometimes it widens for different types of program, and then other times it's just a path. But really lush, and this idea of sort of bringing in a landscape that's 40 floors above you is something that is really, really wonderful and unique that they have in Singapore. So then you can also make these connections between the green oasis, and then down below is the hotel amenity floor. And there's a pool that juts out because you have the hawker center below that. 300 rooms. It's an Ascot hotel, a chain that Capital Land has throughout the region. And the hawker center. So you can sit in CBD of Singapore and you can get a $5 bowl of noodles. And it's one of the sort of main places for the folks in the city to actually come and grab lunch. There are also these wonderful rooms to get out of the rain during the monsoon, and just and the way that the building meets the ground as well is quite generous and quite lush as well. So for us, a wonderful client with a wonderful project to do. 240,000 square meters. Oliver mentioned Google, and this is the headquarters. This is one of 4 buildings within Mountain View that we've designed. These are projects that were co-designed and co-built with Thomas Heatherwick Architects. I always like to say, because we kind of switched with each building, one of us did the outside and the other one did the inside, and it's really hard to actually tell who was the innie and outie in each of these buildings. These we call napkins or handkerchiefs, and the idea here is always to not have direct sunlight hit your screen, because you have 3,000 people working on these terraces, and glare is a major issue. They also are connected to the areas below. So the terraces are above basically a medina of meeting rooms, bathrooms, canteens, and so forth. So all of the support spaces are under that. And then you have these stairs that, again, widen and allow for social interaction, connecting you. The whole thing is the largest kind of geothermal exchange in the United States. And about 40% of the building's operational energy comes from the roof, which is all photovoltaic shingles. We created about 30 new building systems in this project alone, where we brought all of these new building systems that anyone now can use that were tested and regulated in this process. Also, it's a water positive building, so the water that hits the site is all retained, and it is, of course, a wetland. So there's a lot of issues in terms of just being very respectful to the ecosystem, the general ecosystem around the site. 410,000 square meters. So it's true, we designed a power plant. This is in Copenhagen as well, so really worth a trip for any of you. We'd love to tour you around if New Zealand Institute of Architects wants to set up a trip. And this is, I think, what I love about Denmark is that even something as utilitarian as a power plant gets a architectural competition, because they feel that architects can actually contribute to the formation of these typically engineered buildings, and typically also shunned off and fenced off from society. So when we were given this task, we basically said, wow, household trash can be converted into energy, and has been for 70 years in Denmark. They're one of the world leaders in waste to energy. And it's the biggest investment of a building in the history of Denmark. Denmark's about 5.5 million people, so slightly larger than New Zealand. But so you have basically the same sort of sense of ambition here. And it's, of course, a country that has a winter climate, Scandinavian climate, but it's the flattest of all of the Scandinavian countries. So there's not an Olympic downhill team to speak of. So when we have mountains of trash, why not graft a ski slope on top of this mountain of trash and create a skiable kind of surface that you can see here in the lower left. So instead of fencing this off, it's actually something that we want people to come to and climb and scale. And then there's a praised ski bar at the very, very, very top. And the next time you come, you can rent skis that you see here, and then just ski down this recycled plastic surface, which is then also integrated with the whole landscaping. And there are about 30,000 different planting species that are also rewilding this part of Copenhagen that was always gray and hardscape. So the project has been really well received. It integrates other features like climbing walls, and has really become a tourist attraction in many ways. So people that normally would not have come to Copenhagen are making a detour to see it. 800,000 square meters. This is at the scale of sort of city building and neighborhood building. So Toyota, a car manufacturer, had come to us and said, when you architects are showing the future of the world, there are not a lot of cars in your renderings. And they felt it was an existential discussion that we needed to put cars in the renderings. And then we said, well, times are changing, and maybe we could help you think of the future of Toyota. So we got into this exercise where they thought of themselves as a product-producing company. They produce cars. And then we said, well, what if you're a mobility company and you provide a service? And that could be on 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 4 wheels, 50 wheels. And that was kind of an aha moment for them to look at the future. And they started off as a sewing machine company pre-war, World War II. And it was only after World War II that they took the assembly line of making sewing machines and weaving machines and then made motors for cars and then made the entire car. So we talked about the possibility of actually thinking of the creation of cities in the future through a kind of woven pattern. And if this is a normal, typical street where everything is happening on one kind of area, we split and create autonomous vehicles going and delivering goods and services. We have an e-scooter, e-bike kind of path, and we have a pedestrian-only path. And these we then layer on top of each other to create a grid that can then morph to a given site or a given topography. And this was then presented as a potential beta testing site for their own autonomous kind of technology research. And so as these paths cross, then you use the technology of GPS and looking at where there's conflicts and making sure that the car shuts down. Within the home, there's a lot of delivery systems that we're also looking at, drones. And so Toyota is actually expanding its own belief of what it does and wants to now help cities to integrate these new technologies of EVs as well as autonomous information. And this was presented at the 2020 CES convention. That was a month before COVID hit. And as everywhere else closed down, these guys got active. And so in 2021, they held a groundbreaking, and they were taking down the plant, the auto plant from the 1960s, and in its place, they're building this kind of prototypical beta testing city. So within, I think, 2 years or so, the first phase of 12 buildings will be done, and they will extend it there as well as other sites around the world. Up to 1 million square meters. This is where I came from for coming here. This is New York, 2012. This is when Sandy, the hurricane superstorm, hit the city, walloped it all up and down the East Coast. Nearly $20 billion of damage, loss of life, 200,000 people homeless. So in that outcome of where neither the governor of New York nor the mayor of New York at the time used the words climate change or thinking about kind of how climate was going to affect the city, overnight the city leapfrogged and had a new department called Recovery and Resiliency, and basically a deputy mayor that was one position below the mayor to create a vision for how the city would work in the future. And it was a global competition, 120 teams entered. And this is again where you all here in Auckland and with the 1,200 kilometers of waterfront could also teach a lot to New York. And this is where we could really, really help each other and exchange knowledge. But we came up with an idea with a lot of Dutch know-how. One Architecture was another collaborator here in Arcadis. And we came up with the idea of creating the Big U, 10 miles of contiguous coastal protection to basically protect all of the areas that were flooded during Sandy. So that's what you see there in the upper left is the Big U all the way around. And then we did the first section called ESCR. All of this was not kind of thought out of thin air. Everything was through hundreds of community meetings, listening to how people were affected and what their needs were post Sandy. And so the process has been one of the most intensive of my career and of Big's career. We work with 7 different public agencies. So it's not one client, it's a hydra. And they're not all speaking to each other. They all have different budget battles. And you literally have to kind of curate that process. So parks, transportation, environmental protection, the mayor's office, all are, have different agendas and different visions. So this is a park that's a fairly large park. With the other parts of the Big U all put together, that would be like our generation's gift of Central Park in terms of its scale, size, and the value that it would really bring to the city. So just being a part of that, conceptualizing something on the scale of Central Park is just is pretty amazing. And just to tell you about the complexity here, so this is tendered through the Department of Roads and Bridges. And when we drew up this concept as architects, we wanted to, of course, be able to work on it. And they told us, yeah, but we don't have hourly rates for architects. We only work with engineers and landscape architects. So they wouldn't hire us as architects to work on this project. We had to literally create landscape architecture. Oh, we know how to do landscape architecture. And then we went back and we reapplied and we got to stay on the job. But that's the kind of thinking that you sometimes have to get over to make things possible. And I'm just going to go very quickly. It's a park that's performing, and this is also there to protect you during those storm events. And all the other time, it's there to provide joy and for all the different generations. So the first phase of it is now built and open. Eric Adams, the mayor, was very, very happy and is excited about the next thing. So this is the last project, 10 million square meters. We just presented it a few weeks ago. The King of Bhutan reached out. He had seen the abstract Netflix special and was intrigued by what he saw. He has an issue in Bhutan of informal development. Things are just growing much faster than they ever have. And it's willy-nilly, so there's no plan, there's no guiding principles. And it's a country that is entirely built on mindfulness, on the gross happiness index since the 1970s. The king's father was the one who enacted that. So they want to preserve 70% of the country, the nature. They want to remain in a historical kind of language that's very, very important to them. They want to make sure that the artists and craftsmen are supported. And every space has a layer of spirituality to them. So this is all epitomized in the gross national happiness, and I encourage all of you to Google this afterwards to find out what it is. So these are the guiding principles of the plan, and the idea is to basically have a nature kind of based design principles, which we call social nature, and that these are looking at it's very hilly and very mountainous, so there are very few areas of flat land where most of the development occurs. And so we're looking at sort of, basically 100 years in the future of where that development might occur. There are tons of rivers, so all of the mountains are emptying onto the plateaus or into the flat spaces. So integrating the agriculture into this delta of rivers that are always moving. So you have to be also, a bridge there is far longer than a typical bridge because it just has to be that way. And to create a kind of architectural language that is built on basic sort of Bhutanese traditional vernacular architecture, but also learning from Alpine architecture and looking for ways that the new structures can start to create a visual identification, orientation, a kind of placing certain programs where they make sense. And so this is just a few images. We're now in a sort of delving deeper into the master plan and working on that and finally, this is a dam that's now currently under construction. So looking at it as an Indian stepwell possibility and creating kind of social spaces inside the dam that are accessible so that you could actually climb the entire dam, and it also serves as a bridge between two areas. So it's a way to think, I think, about space. That's the next frontier, of course. So at one of these events, Bjarke met Jason Ballard. He is someone who is producing 3D print machines that you see here. It was asked of Jeannie what she thinks of the future of suburban architecture, and this is actually something that is looked at in terms of creating longer-term homes and fire-resistant homes and tornado-resistant homes, because one of the biggest things in the Midwest is, of course, how often the homes have to be rebuilt. And so this is really looking at how to create something that has a much longer timeline. And they are producing homes key-ready from the time that the printer gets to the site and the person moves in 14 days. Which is pretty remarkable, and they're bringing the home prices down below $100,000. They are currently around $170,000. So it's an incredible technology that NASA has also taken interest in, and we're working with NASA and ICON to create the first habitat on the moon using the space dust, or the moon dust, the regolith, as the building material. And you can see there that these donut shapes are actually those first habitats, and this is actually now being tested for the printing and all of that. So that's funded as well, and extremely exciting. So we've just gone from a product, the Treehouse Lite, to a unit of urban rigor, buildings, neighborhoods, and regions, and very excited to have shared this with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kai, for that incredibly entertaining series of projects. I'm not sure any other practice can say they've gone from bird boxes to the moon in 40 minutes. Quite impressive. My personal kind of first question is actually about your own office, because I think for an architecture practice to have the possibility to design a headquarters that kind of embodies their whole identity is incredibly unusual. And I was actually racking my brains trying to think of another firm that's ever actually done that. How did you go about it? How did you try and kind of distill the essence of big into one project?
Foster's, I think, is actually someone that has also had the chance to build their own space. It is certainly a luxury, but I would say it's probably been within Bjarke's mind for a very long time. And it's, what you're often trying to do is you're trying to convince people about your process or your way of working. And it's very hard to, if you're an architect, people see you as an architect. And then when you suddenly start doing landscape architecture, they're like, well, I'll hire you as an architect, but not as a landscape architect. Or same with engineering. I mean, who would ever hire an architect to engineer something? So we needed to prove that we were capable and able to do all of these things. And since we couldn't find a client that would allow us to do a holistic one, we became our own client to do it.
So it's kind of proof of concept in a way, of all of the different skills within the office in one project. One of the most popular questions you might be surprised to learn is, how did you or the client deal with the bird poo in the Treehouse project?
Surprisingly, it is the most often kind of question.
Okay.
But just as I think birds don't poop where they sleep. And so there isn't a problem with bird poop on the project.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's easy. Self-maintaining, very neat birds. Someone has asked, as your scales keep increasing, towards the entirety of planet Earth and beyond, What insights into better community engagement and empowerment is Big also learning and developing?
In places, of course, like New York, one of its the vitality of New York is in its diversity. So when you do community engagement there on a project like the Big U, you actually have to be very respectful to the number of languages and the backgrounds of people. So, where we can't expect everyone to know English, and therefore, when you do something like this, you actually ensure that Mandarin, Spanish, and even other languages are offered. And if not as translators, then we invite radio stations. And then you have a radio announcer kind of listening to what you're saying and then translating a community board meeting into the radio. And we find that it actually increases the participation from dozens of people to hundreds of people. And then suddenly, when you get hundreds of people to comment or to make suggestions, politicians are also way more interested to actually follow their lead.
Interesting, yeah. I've got a question that I think probably actually applies to practices in this room as well, which is the issue of collaboration. And I'm interested on one of your biggest, most high-profile projects, the Google complex in both King's Cross and Mountain View. Two architects of such kind of high renown and profile. How do you go about that collaborative process?
So that's thanks to Larry Page, the founder, one of the two founders of Google. They had hired 3 architects prior to hiring the 2 of us. And in each of those cases, it was a single architect. And Larry said, when we engineers have a challenge, we stick 10 engineers into the room and they collectively come up with a solution. He goes, architects have an issue of ego, and that you come into the room and all you do is talk about yourself. And so he said, I'm in this 4th effort of designing the headquarters, he was not going to allow himself to hire just one. He was going to hire multiple. And during the interview process, it could have been even more, 3 or 4. But we hit it off really well. So Bjarke, Thomas, and Larry, they literally met once a month in person through the design process to reach that collective conclusion.
Can you reveal, in terms of the inside and the outside, which practice did which in King's Cross and Mountain View?
So within Mountain View, there's 4 of those square domes, and 2 of them are innie and outies by Big doing the exterior and Thomas doing the interior. And then it flipped there. Within King's Cross, it's a little harder to tell, but Thomas does move very quickly into the bespoke pieces. And so he does move into things that you touch and that you see. And I think one cool thing to consider is that the squomes are a suburban answer to Google's brief. And King's Cross is the urban, basically, translation of the suburban brief. And if you do know that, and you understand the site in King's Cross and how it's stacked, it becomes a really interesting sectional exercise to understand how the Googlers work and how they perceive innovation happens. Like where does innovation happen? Yeah. And they say it's not on the screen; it's in the interactions between people.
Interesting. Yeah. Talking of suburban development, I was wondering, when you presented the project with the 3D printed homes, is there a danger that those, even though they're very technologically innovative, they're actually replicating the problems of kind of tract suburban housing that both America and New Zealand is kind of plagued with?
So the question of single-family dwellings detached is at the core of society. And I think that you can now either work within societal values, or you can decide not to work in those. We do both. We try to have conversations of multifamily and trying to veer people towards even row houses are better than single family detached. And so we see it as an evolutionary conversation that we start here. We actually learn what it's like to build in the Midwest so that we can actually speak more intelligently with Midwestern values about what single-track family. But the biggest issue is that the current houses and the housing stock is built for like 20 to max 40 years. And these homes are built more with a 50 to 70 year life. So by extending it twice, you're already doing half as much in the amount of effort and work.
Yeah. One very popular question, because I guess we have so many architects in the audience, is about cold bridging on your container project. So how is the cold bridge and internal moisture dealt with in the containers on a coastal zone?
Yeah. Wow. So one thing that the Danes do extremely well is heat pumps. So Danfoss, I'm not sure if they export here, but you have Danfoss, Grundfos. We worked very closely with the whole kind of insular and insulation of these upcycled containers. So there is a kind of sandwich insulation pad that allows for the cold bridging, or disallows for the cold bridging. And then there's radiant floor heating. So these kids are paying, as I said, like a lot less for their homes, and they have heated bathroom floors. And it's a little bit what we call hedonistic sustainability, is that if you actually create something that in some way has a higher quality of life, and you enjoy bathroom floors that are heated, and you can do it in a environmentally responsible way, then that is actually going to do more to have people change their habits than if you just tell them, have small windows, don't fly, and freeze. So it's always looking for ways to find the happiest of mediums.
Yeah, I'm going to try and squeeze in one final question. Just in terms of the Big U project and the dry line, do you think that has lessons for Auckland's coastline? Are there things here that we could learn from in terms of that master plan?
Absolutely, because I think that Big U is not a single answer. It's not a silver bullet. It is, when you dissect it, there are 100 different ways that it actually deals with coastal flooding. And within that array of different kind of toolkit, you can find things that are very applicable to here. I haven't gone in depth into the Auckland coastline, but I can see a lot of hard edges that you've built over time. I can see a lot of infill, and I saw a flood map during our workshop. And so very similar issues of, we've literally created this problem, we as humans, over the past 100 years. And it's a matter of actually daylighting existing rivers. It's finding respectful wetlands, ways of dealing with coastal surge. And it's dealing with the rain that hits, of course, the rooftops and the streets, and creating as much porosity and as much sponginess in the city itself. So Singapore, again, as an example, 25, 30 years ago, decided to green every roof, both existing architecture and new architecture. So 50% of every roof has to be green. And that has had two effects: that they have less water to deal with in monsoon events, and that it has lowered the heat island index. So, these are things that you can then take back to insurance companies, and you can take back to mortgage financiers and say, we're actually reducing the air conditioning load in Auckland by a couple of degrees, and that has value if you can prove it.
An excellent note to end on. So before the giveaway, could we please have a round of applause for Kai and his sponsor, APL?